Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, I'm Thomas Hubert, Digital Editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. The beginning of this week has been dominated by the release of the World Health Organization's report looking into the links between processed meat, red meat and cancer. Beyond the alarmist headlines, I sat down with our meat market specialist, Phelim O'Neill, to take a quiet look at the details of the publication and its implications for meat producers.
The International Agency for Research on Cancer, an organisation that undertook the research on behalf of the WHO, they've identified two types of meat with differing cancer risks. The one with the highest risk is processed meat, and the one with a lower level of risk, where they believe is probably carcinogenic to humans, but aren't decisive in that or can't be decisive in that, is basically, I suppose, what we call core meat. Now, the difference between processed meat and prime red meat is quite simply where something has been done with the meat, whether that's beef, pork, lamb, veal, any other meat, such as fermentation, smoking it, curing it, salting it, whether it's to preserve it or to change its texture and taste, then we're into a processed product. And I suppose the common examples that we'll all be familiar with there will be sausages, ham, bacons, various salamis that are used in pizza, etc. It's where the meat product has been enhanced by some other additional process. Then when we talk about red meat itself, we're talking essentially about the muscle of the meat. So instead of talking about bacon or sausages in the context of pork, we're talking about your pork chop or your pork roast. We're talking about your beef steak or a beef roast, a lamb chop or a leg of lamb. That is the distinction. It's whole muscle meat as opposed to meat that has been cured or altered in some way.
So this red meat, whole muscle meat, is probably carcinogenic to a level, but as you said, nothing conclusive at this stage. However, if we go back to the processed meat, the panel that issued this study has put it in group 1, which is the same group as really smoking or being exposed to asbestos. Does that mean it's as dangerous?
No, and that's where this report, I feel, falls down and causes considerable confusion. It is technically correct that in terms of being a definitive potential to cause cancer, then it merits entry into Category 1. However, that fails to make any evaluation of the relative risks that are involved in the different things that are in Category 1. For example, smoking, I'm led to believe, increases the likelihood of developing cancer by something like 600%. Consumption in excess of 50 grams of processed meat daily is said in the report that will increase cancer risk by 18%. Even that is misleading. That's not true. It's 18% of the present risk. Now, if we take the example of a 50-year-old male, over the next 10 years, even if that person isn't a meat eater at all, their likelihood of developing bowel cancer, which is the cancer that's most typically referred to here in its various guises, the likelihood of that occurring in the 50-year-old male over the next 10 years is less than 1%. It's not 0.68, in fact, of 1%. Now, if that person over the course of that period were then to increase their consumption to 50 grams per day or more, then that risk, 18% of 0.68%, brings that level of risk up to 0.8%. So even if they don't adhere to the guidelines to eat less than that particular level, the increase in risk of developing cancer as a result of eating processed meat is extremely small. It's so minute as is almost not measurable.
How have consumers so far reacted to this? How is it likely to affect the way they buy and eat those products?
That's something I suppose we'll have to wait on consumer sales data in the coming days and weeks to properly evaluate. I suppose all we can use at this stage on 2 days after, less than a day after the report's published, is I suppose the anecdotal evidence. And the anecdotal evidence is very strong that consumer behaviour hasn't really been affected at all. I thought it was course, interesting to observe the vox pops, both in Ireland and indeed on BBC television last night, where so many people were so almost dismissive of this research, and I wouldn't encourage that either. All scientific research is important. Research is an evolutionary process. And just to put that in context, if you were around in the 1980s, we were advised of the danger of dairy products and the cholesterol and that we should avoid them in our diet. Then the advice went on to avoid eggs, that they were considered bad. But more recent research would highlight a very, very positive role both dairy and eggs contribute to the human diet. And I think the most recent and strongest dietary advice from all nutritional agencies is about the importance of a balanced diet, about the importance of moderation, and that applies to all products. And one of the other products that's in this category one is alcohol, and we know there's very, very clear guidelines on the amount of alcohol that we should consume, and by and large most people in society do that. Some people overindulge occasionally, and I think the strong advice is for those that do that they should cut back and work within the guidelines. So I think if we follow the advice that's provided by organisations like the Food Safety Authority of Ireland and their similar type organisations throughout Europe, then I think the guidance of beef and lamb and all red meats having an important role in a balanced diet will make sure and minimise our consumers' risk to exposure of developing cancer, indeed any other undesirable diseases.
Phelim, while you're here, you've also been reporting on Poland in a series of articles for the Irish Farmers Journal in the past few weeks. You've told us recently that Poland was really a big exporter of beef because of this big dairy-to-beef production that people don't consume locally, and this makes it a big exporter, very much like Ireland, the second in the EU actually. How does that translate in the country on the ground in terms of the processing industry, the factories there?
Yeah, Poland is a very, very different country from Ireland, even though it does share in common with us being a major net beef exporter. And I suppose the reality is that Polish people tend not to eat beef. They would consume very substantial quantities of pork and poultry, but they only have eat about 1.5 kilos on average per person annually. So they basically don't consume the beef they produce. The beef they produce is very much originates in the dairy herd, and the processing structure and indeed the whole farm structure of Poland up until this point has been very much small micro farms supplying, I suppose, what you might describe as small local abattoirs, but that has been changing in recent times.
And there is interest from Ireland in that industry because ABP is there.
Yes, the ABP company would have acquired their first facility in Poland in 2011 and just then 2 years later would have acquired a second one. So they have now two factories in Poland, one that focuses on the slaughter of cattle in an abattoir, the second which focuses on cutting and processing of the cattle that have been slaughtered. Farmers Journal had the opportunity to see those plants and see them in operation and to get an insight and get an overview actually of the nature of beef processing Polish style, and given I suppose the company that has established a structure in Ireland and throughout Britain, it's little surprise to see that the same basic principles carry forward overseas as well.
What is the strategy there? Why is it interesting for a company like ABP to move into Poland in the last few years?
Well, I suppose in conversation with the ABP people, they would make it very clear to us that I suppose they have always been a company that has looked to grow their business. They're very open-minded about where that growth is. Wherever there's an opportunity that they feel they can make work, they're likely to take it on. And I would have no doubt myself, I suppose, given the experience that they've built up over several decades building a beef export business out of Ireland, that they will be very comfortable going into another country that doesn't have a strong domestic market as such, that they basically have to export outside that country. And given the international market expertise that they will have developed over the decades, you can see how it would actually be a very natural fit for a company like ABP to move into Poland.
So it's more of an opportunity for ABP, for example, to export out of Poland to other markets. You don't see this necessarily as competition for Irish beef?
The company would be very, very quick to point out that the product that Ireland offers is totally different from what is available in Poland, and I suppose they would describe it in the context of a premium range and a value range. In Poland, the beef herd is very much drawn, say, from dairy origin. It doesn't have, it's not to be compared, I suppose, with Irish suckle or steer beef. In Poland, male cattle are kept as bulls and slaughtered usually at 2-year-old or maybe even a little bit older. In some cases, they don't achieve anywhere near the carcass weights that they do here, and they don't achieve the conformation. So they would target that then, and they have several markets, I suppose, on mainland Europe. They would make it very clear that is where they have targeted that produce for. It's Europe. Mainland Europe is very much a bull beef producing part of the world, with the exception of France, Western France. So that is very much what they've targeted that for. Ireland will continue to offer the premium range of beef, both, I suppose, for mainland Europe and for the UK, but they do have the other as a low-cost value range for use in their European and indeed, I presume, international markets as well.
Thank you, Phelim. Your reports on Poland are in this week's Irish Farmers Journal, and the previous reports from the previous weeks are available online in our archive at farmersjournal.ie. Thank you very much.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
We did enjoy a real Indian summer through most of October, but it now looks like more regular rain, and the drop in temperatures are here to stay. I talked to Irish Farmers Journal dairy specialist Aidan Brennan about the current grazing conditions.
Yeah, Thomas, it's been an excellent October up to this weekend, but the last couple of days has been, I think, a couple of inches of rain falling in many places. It's really affecting ground conditions at the moment, and farmers are looking at housing cows or kind of managing grazing in the wet weather. So,
and there's still a bit of grass, so how to make the most of that now?
There is, yeah. The farm covers are still reasonably high. Well, they're on target for in a lot of places, but it's the managing the rest of the grass that's out there is going to be a bit of a challenge.
So I've heard a lot about on and off grazing. Can you explain how to do that?
Yeah, I suppose, look, it's a tool that farmers can use to extend grazing during wet weather. Basically, Thomas, it means that you're grazing for 2 bouts. So you're 24 hours in the day, but you're actually grazing cows for 2 3-hour periods. So you're grazing for 6 hours out of the 24. And results from trial work done in Moore Park show that cows get 90 to 95% of their intake in those 2-hour periods. So I suppose the idea of it is when your cows are out grazing, they're doing nothing else but grazing. And so they're minimising the amount of walking around they're doing and everything else. So it's a really useful tool that many farmers use during the wet period.
Now, on and off grazing, we're talking about reasonable conditions. You're not going to do that if it's actually completely soaked, are you?
You're better not to do it if it's raining, when there's actually rain falling, but you can go out immediately after rain. Now, look, it's all depending on soil type as well, but that's a tool farmers, even on dry farms, use. But I mean, look, it's a different story if you're on a very heavy soil. On-off grazing mightn't work as well. There comes a point in time where you just have to house cows. But for the most part, I mean, it's a tool that farmers can use to extend rotation. It's just one of the tools.
Okay, that's on and off grazing, Aidan. Now, what other types of tools can you use to manage grass at this time of year?
So there's also strip wires or grazing in square blocks. So we know cows do less damage if they're grazing in a square block as opposed to a long rectangular block. Moving on cows after every milking, or a 12-hour strip wire. And of course then there's a feeding issue. So many farmers now are putting in silage and other forages because they're trying to supplement grass. But I think if you feed that silage before they go to grazing, they'll do a lot more damage outside. They'll have a lot less appetite. So ideally, after milking, cows should go to grass, and if it needs to be fed silage, should bring them in before milking, so they get their silage in that case. There are some people then they're starting to house cows at night, or house cows by day and graze at night, depending on how much grass they have available.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Information meetings on the Beef Data and Genomics programme continue to draw large crowds several nights a week across the country, and we're running a focus supplement on winter breeding and this BDGP scheme in this week's Irish Farmers Journal. Our livestock specialists Nathan Tuffy and Darren Carty answer our readers' most common questions about the programme.
One that has come up, Darren, I suppose, is farmers that are buying in heifers and may want to breed off them. may look at genotyping them as well. So, like, can a farmer buy in a heifer and have them genotyped before breeding to know what the genomic evaluation is going to be?
Yeah, I suppose that's a question that comes up a good bit from, say, both a farmer buying in to try and hit that 20% requirement for 2018 or the 50% for 2020, or it also comes up from farmers that aren't in the scheme and that, say, want to maybe get their heifers genotyped to make them more saleable. If we look at the terms and conditions of the scheme and say we look at what actually qualifies an animal as being 4 or 5 star as being eligible, and if you really sort of, I suppose, follow the terms and conditions to the real detail, the department says that an animal has to be genotyped 4 and 5 star. As we know, say, the tag numbers or that the tags have been sent out to farmers to take a sample and to get them returned, and that farmers that at the moment that have 4 and 5 star heifers are eagerly waiting to see whether they will increase or whether they'll sort of stay at that 4 and 5 star or whether they'll alternate up and down. We asked Andrew Cromie of the ICBF that question this week, and I suppose the answer that he came back is to say that it will vary in all situations, that you will have some animals that will, say, go maybe from a 2 and 3 star up to 4 and 5, but likewise you'll have a percentage of animals that will go from 4 and 5 star down to maybe 2 and 3 star. The ICBF, I suppose, expect over the course of the programme or the 6 years that the numbers that are fluctuating will be lower because the reliability will be increasing. But it is something to take consideration of. Whether a farmer, I suppose, can get him genotyped now before he starts into breeding. For tags that are sent in already, it's expected that the genotype results will be out in spring 2016. For animals that, say, a farmer that isn't in the programme and wants to maybe get them genotyped before he sells, ICBF say that they expect to have this facility up and running in early 2016, but it also will come, say, a priority is going to be given to people in the scheme. After that, they will be able to say, hope to have a facility in place, but it will probably cost a few euros extra than the 22 euros that's being charged to farmers at the minute.
Okay. Another issue that's been coming up a lot, Darren, too, is, okay, say I'm a farmer and I have a 4 or a 5 star heifer on hand. She might have a lower liability. If I turn around and sell her to my neighbour as a 4 star or a 5 star heifer, if he goes next year then and gets that animal genotyped and she turns out to be a 3 star, does that mean that I'm at fault, or who's at fault there?
Yeah, like that's one, Nathan, that we've seen time and time again in Ballymote, Ball, Mohill, all the mart meetings, I suppose, that we've been at, it comes up, and there's a real concern, I suppose, in the farmer selling, but there's also, I suppose, a concern the farmer buying, that he's buying it in faith that it is 4 and 5 star and it's going to stay that way. The answer we've been given by ICBF and the Department of Agriculture is that no, that the sale can't be contested after, if the animal, say, falls below. They say that an animal is purchased at a point in time with a given Eurostar evaluation. The evaluation changes over time as more information becomes available on the animal, or say as more information, as we know, comes available on relatives, puddles, or also with the genomic data coming in, that say an animal could change from 4 or 5 star just by its own genomic data. So I suppose there will be fluctuations there with the department and ICBF. They say no, the sales can't be contested.
Okay. I suppose another one that kind of keeps coming up time and time again too, Darren, is that if you look at our dairy compatriots, like they can go and they can get an animal genotyped if they want. Say I have 3 heifers that are born this year, and I'm wondering which one is the best one to breed off. Can I go and get one of those genotyped myself and pay for it myself without having to wait for ICBF to select it?
Yeah, it is something that will bring on and it would help the scheme greatly. At the moment, I suppose the ICBF are concentrating on the huge volume of tags that have come in. What they say is that this will be rolled out in spring 2016, and that hopefully they'll be able to roll out that the farmer can get heifers genotyped, he can get bulls genotyped, or I suppose for anyone in the programme, if they wanted to turn around and get more of the animals done, that they could do it, but it will come at a cost to the farmer.
Okay. I suppose just the whole genotyping thing itself, there's been a lot of talk about it. Farmers are talking about the reliability of the index itself. How much will the actual genotyping of the animal increase the reliabilities by?
Yeah, like that's the big question. Is that there's a huge amount of, say, funds being put into this. There's a huge amount of farmers' time being put into this, and even if you looked at outside of say genomics, or you looked at the database, is that it all comes back to the quality of data coming out is influenced by the quality of data going in. ICBF say the process of genotyping is accurate. Now that is provided that a high quality sample in DNA has been taken by the herd owner. And look, at farmers are well versed in this stage of taking the BVD samples and now say genomic samples. So by and large, 95% of the samples are coming in that are very high quality. There might be some samples that, as we've seen in the BVD, that may be missing, say, the sample, or they may have to be retaken. But say, based on everything going well, the data coming in, you'd expect, or say what ICBF expect, is that work taken out by them and Teagasc would go that on a young bull or a young animal with low reliability of 20%, this might come up to 30%. Now they do expect that's low enough increase. They expect it over the course of the programme, as we start to get more information, that you'll be going from maybe about 20% reliability to 50% reliability, and that's really where the industry needs to get to. The farmer going from 20% to 30% reliability, it's still small. 30% reliability is still small. Where you want to get to is you want to get to 50%.
Okay, just last one before we finish up, Darren. There's been a lot of questions. Farmers are out there trying to buy 4 and 5 star heifers at the moment. You go to a mart sale, and there's very little data on the star index of the animal up on the boards. We know that ICBF have said that they will be working with the marts, but do we have any time frame at this stage of when the data will be displayed at mart sales?
Yeah, unfortunately that's a limitation of the scheme so far, and that farmers that want to buy heifers at the minute, or the farmers that are operating the system and buying weanlings, bringing them through and bulling them, they are at a loss in that they can't see the information of the heifers coming through. ICBF say that they're working with the marts and that they hope to have this up and running in all marts over the next 12 months. There has been some tests done in some marts, but it hasn't been rolled out. There's also been, I suppose, murmurs of the department having a grant scheme that would provide funding to marts to update boards, but as of yet we're not fully sure of this.
Darren, thank you very much. For more details on the Beef Data Genomics programme, you'll find a lot more details in the Irish Farmers Journal today in our special feature on it in the Focus supplement.
The Irish Farmers Journal weekly podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Now let's hear from Christy Kavanagh, a Christmas tree grower in County Wicklow. My colleague Odile Evans met him at a meeting with the Gardaí on Wednesday, where the authorities and the local community were discussing Operation Hurdle, a way of working together to prevent the theft of hundreds of trees that used to affect farms in the area during the busy period before Christmas.
Our farm is about 60-70 acres and is located midway between Newton McKennedy and Roundwood. Mm-hmm. It's a dedicated Christmas tree farm. We grow our trees from seed. So we grow a tree in the nursery for 4 years, then we plant it out for another 10 to 12 years.
Before Operation Hurdle, you were saying earlier, it could cost the government up to 30,000 a year for every how many trees sold?
It would indeed, yeah. The problem was before Operation Hurdle, there was roughly 2,000 trees stolen, we estimate, in the Wicklow area, and a retail value of €50 each. That would equal 100,000, and if you add 23% VAT to that, that'd be 123,000. So with VAT and taxes, there was a loss to the Exchequer of approximately 30,000, or maybe 30,000 plus, which was a considerable amount of money.
That's a huge amount of money. So what has Operation Hurdle done then?
Basically, Operation Hurdle has put a full stop, I'd say, or a 99% stop to this activity. Because when as I say, the gentlemen that stay in bed all day and work at night hear about the armed support unit in their area, see the chopper going across at night, see the guard activity on the ground, and know that the growers as well are doing their own security systems with webcams, solar. In remote areas we have solar powered units now on the farms. The people that were doing these thefts have moved on to other things. I don't know what they're, maybe they're working.
So Operation Hurdle then for you is more about working with the Gardaí. Would that be
working correct? With the Gardaí? I do describe it as at my area, the ripple effect from Operation Hurdle, in that we'd say my 87-year-old mother, when she says on the lane that she sees the guard on our lane, it's not only the Christmas tree grower people that are get support from it, it's all that, as I say, the ripple effects of these old people in these areas that would have felt very vulnerable or that now get a lot of reassurance from the extra support.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Odile Evans also attended Macra na Feirme's national conference last weekend, and one of the topics discussed there was access to finance for young farmers.
Yeah, so Phil Hogan addressed the audience at the agricultural conference in the Riverside Hotel, and he brought up issues for young farmers, and in particular he addressed the issue of finance and access to finance for young farmers.
It's not acceptable in Ireland to have financial institutions charging 170 basis points more than they should to get short-term loans available to farmers. Macra na Feirme and Seja have been ploughing a lone furrow for far too long in relation to this issue. And I have engaged with the European Investment Bank to see can I get a bit of competition into the system. Because there is certainly no hope, in my view, of convincing our existing financial institutions that they're going to move so quickly towards a more generous regime to assist any farmer, not least young farmers, in getting access to credit. And Kevin is right when he's told his story about the frustrations of that. And I know he hit a bad time economically and financially in the country, and we allow for that. But let's learn from that for the future and get low interest loans over longer terms available so that there is some fixed view and fixed repayments available to people, that when they start with their investment, that they know over 15 or 20 years what their repayments are likely to be, more or less, every year. That's what I'm trying to do with various financial models that I'm developing with the European Investment Bank. And I'm in intensive negotiations, and I hope to conclude those negotiations by the end of this year if I can.
So European Commissioner there, Phil Hogan, mentioning a farmer apparently called Kevin. Who is that?
Yeah, Kevin is actually a Nuffield scholar. He's a 22-year-old farmer, and he has started out with no land at all, and he's now milking 100 cows and plans to grow to 270. And he brought up the access to credit for young farmers because that is his Nuffield study, is what he's focusing on.
I'm the youngest of 11, grew up in a very wet, fragmented farm, and it wasn't very viable, so I leased a farm off my uncle in County Galway, Carlastrand. It's a 36-hectare block that was, it was originally a dairy farm, so most infrastructure was in place.
And how did you find setting up? Were people ready to help you? What was the story there?
I was very lucky in that I'd done my work experience with Timmy Quinn, a former Young Farmer of the Year. He was a great help to me. The context that I met through Timmy, the discussion group that he got me into, was a huge help. People were very willing to help, particularly once I mentioned Timmy, they were willing to help me. I guess because I was leasing and buying stock, I found it with no collateral. I found it very difficult to obtain finance from banks because I had no security to offer them. Eventually, I convinced somebody to guarantor me by paying them a small bit. I guess, look at it, it wasn't easy.
And you're saying there for young farmers to set up, getting access to credit is quite difficult. Is there any other options there for them?
There are, yes. So it's, I suppose route one is always bank, and I think that's really where, other than online banking and ATMs, as I said earlier, banks have shown no innovation. So I think there's other options there. It's going forward over the next 10 years, I think the whole thing could change. If you look at America, as little as 10% comes from the banking sector in some agri-sectors. So there's other schemes there, such as EII scheme. There's all sorts of microfinance options there, crowdfunding. There's all sorts of other private funding options that very few farmers have thought of yet.
Okay. And do you think Phil Hogan today addressed what you were saying about access to credit for young farmers? Did he address it in the way you thought he should?
I think he did. He spoke about access to funds in the EIB. I think he spoke more so about access to cheaper finance, rather than maybe, I think something needs to be done from the Commission in terms of generating a fund or ring fencing a fund that would act as a guarantee. So it would reduce the amount of collateral required by a minority of young farmers, because although they are a minority, they're probably the most progressive bunch of farmers that you're going to come across. So I think if we could ring fence a fund to act as a guarantee to the banks that we could put in place there as security, it would reduce the amount of collateral required.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
There are just a few days left to the pay and file deadline, but it's still time to make a contribution to your pension if you want to cut your tax bill and plan for the future. I asked Peter Young, our farm finance specialist, about this and other tips to make the most of your pension while you have your accounts laid out in front of you at this time of year.
It's the one thing that you can do to reduce your tax bill for 2014 tax year is make a pension. It can still be done. If you make a paper application, you have until the 31st of October. But the majority of farmers and farmers' spouses as well normally put it online to the revenue online. So they have till the 12th of November. So yes, there is time to, if you want to make a pension contribution.
And how much can you put into your pension at this stage to avail of tax rebates and all that? What are your options?
Yeah, your options really, it depends on your age. I mean, it increases from 15% as you get younger all the way up to 40% of your income when you're reaching close to 60. So, I mean, really, first thing is it depends on your age. Second, I suppose it depends on how much money you have to put in. While you save tax, you have to find the rest of it as well. You get, if you're paying the higher rate of tax, you're getting up to 40% saving on the tax, but you have to find the 60% as well. So, I mean, that's one thing that puts a lot of farmers off in pensions, even though it's a very good thing to do for the long term.
Now, the tax side is only one aspect of your pension. Maybe while you're doing your accounts this time of year, it's a good time to review what you're doing with your pension. What do you think people should keep in mind in terms of managing that nest egg for their older days?
Well, people sometimes look at, how much is it done in a year. That can be quite volatile. It can go up and down. But one thing that they should dig beneath the surface is looking at the charges, looking at the fees that are there. Because in a lot of, particularly in the older products, and some people who put it in a few years ago, might not have moved it around and might still be on the old products, the actual fees could be quite high, and they could be a real drag on what you're getting in return, your overall pension, if the people who are running it and if they're taking 2, 3 or 4 or even more % a year in fees.
And the other aspect as well is risk, and some investments might be riskier and have a better chance of giving you a good yield, but maybe when you're getting older it's not the best option. How can you approach that when you're going over the lifetime of your pension?
Yes, and you should be looking to see what the breakdown, what is your money invested in? Is it equities, is it cash, is it bonds? So there can be a range of different things. And a lot of companies now, as you get older, they will actually change that profile. They'll move more out of equities and into cash or into bonds. And as we know, cash and bonds can actually return quite poorly at the moment. So just to look at what the proportions are, are you happy with that? Is that the risk profile you want? And then can it be changed? In some cases you can actually change. You can take your money from one pension product and put it into different pension products as well. So, look at all those options.
And that might be a bit daunting for some people. How can they get help about making those decisions?
Well, the way it's nearly broken down into two types of financial advisors. Those that basically you don't pay them directly, but they do get the fees and the pension. But there is also an increasing number of financial advisors which are fee-based. So you can actually get someone to just look at your pension. You pay him an amount of money, to look at your pension and see does it suit. He's not trying to sell you any products. He's just trying to see, is this the best fit for what you want?
And you've talked to one of those fee-based pension advisors in Country Living this week. What do you take from your interview with him?
Yeah, I talked to Oisin Humphreys there from my advisor. And again, he was laying down the 6 points, and he made a very relevant point that, people put money in, but they don't also follow it up. And, they can change their pension and what it's invested in. Every year they should look at it and see, is it right for them? And are the fees actually, is there a better place for it that you don't have to get as many fees as well?
Thank you, Peter. This is all in this week's Irish Country Living and online at farmersjournal.ie.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.